Hey, Pretty Girl Club. So I wanted to talk about a phenomenon that I have noticed with Exoticals, where a lot of us have these different responses when we're dealing with the Black community. And when I say different responses, I'm talking about trauma responses. You know how they talk about like fight or flight? So one thing I've noticed is that because the groupthink is so strong in the African American community, anytime you are, let's say you're a lighter skinned person, I've noticed that a lot of us have the tendency to try to pretend like we are way darker than we are, or pretend like we are quote unquote blacker than we are. And I actually consider this to be almost like a social trauma response because for a lot of us, we have been bullied so hard into only claiming blackness or bullied so hard into representing blackness to the point where if you admit that you benefit from any isms, then some people are going to automatically get mad and view you as their enemy. And so, in order to prevent that, I've seen a lot of exoticals do this thing where they will say things like, "Oh, I'm not light, I'm brown." And then that person will be literally like beige. And technically, beige is a shade of brown. But I wanted to show this chart and it talks about the four F's. So these are the four different trauma responses. There's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So let's start off by talking about the fight response. So these women are the ones who maybe you got your hair pulled in school, or maybe you got talked badly about, and you were the type of person who would fight back. There's actually a YouTuber I'm thinking of. Her name is Step Into the Light. She has a really good YouTube channel. Be sure to check her out. But there are some of us who will fight back. So it's like if people call you a name, you call them a name. If somebody hits you, you're going to hit them back. If somebody bullies you, you're going to bully them back. If someone tries to intimidate you, you're going to keep that same energy. And I've noticed that whenever people pick on you, it's okay because it's like, oh, they're lashing out in response to the things that they've been through. And it's like, well, just because you've been through certain things, it doesn't make it okay for me to be your emotional punching bag. Just because you feel like you're at the bottom of society, it doesn't make it okay for you to punch upwards at anyone that you think is above you. And so, this is why some exoticals will fight back because they're tired of people randomly disliking them, randomly spreading rumors about them, randomly like not wanting to help them in the workplace or something like that, or trying to sabotage. But the next trauma response I've noticed is flight. So, the way that I think of flight actually is leaving spaces that don't serve you. So, here in the exotical space, we have left colorism channels that are like making blackness into some sort of handicap or making it into some sort of like victimhood. And so we have decided to leave those spaces because we actually are admitting, we are acknowledging our privilege by saying, hey, we don't identify with a lot of the experiences that these women are going through. We don't identify with the Kelly Rowland lifestyle. We identify more so with Beyonce, where it's like, people view you as kind of like this star mean girl, or you only got to where you are because of XYZ isms. And so I actually consider that to be a response to a lot of the things that we've experienced in these other spaces, whether it's online or in real life. A lot of us have decided, hey, we're no longer going to make friends with women who have these mindsets, or you know what, I feel comfortable only dating a guy who looks like me, or only having friends who can understand my background. And then it's funny because let's say you make friends who are also exoticals, then people will try to accuse you of like somehow being racist. That happened to me actually in college. I didn't even do it on purpose. So one of my friends, she was darker skinned. She was black and Puerto Rican. Another one was a Blaxican. Another one was Dominican. The other one was like a lighter skinned black girl. And I remember somebody called out and they were like, oh, you guys only hang out with each other because you guys all have multi ethnic backgrounds. And I had never thought about it until that moment. But I've noticed that this is a part of the flight response that some of us exoticals will have, where it's like, okay, well, from here on out, I'm only going to be friends with or share information with women who I feel can relate to me. And this is because for a lot of us in the past, women have tried to sabotage us out of jealousy. A lot of women have felt resentful about their own place in society, or they have viewed their skin tones or their features or hair texture or whatever as some form of a handicap. And so sometimes if a person feels like they are at the bottom or like they are a perpetual victim, if they see someone who is prosperous, then they're going to automatically try to kind of throw stones and hide their hands. And so this is why a lot of women have chosen the flight response where it's like, okay, I'm just going to get away from these people who always have bad luck. Have you ever been around somebody where it's like there's always some drama with them? They're always having something bad happen. There's always an emergency. They just always seem to have bad luck. I've noticed that the exoticals with the flight response, these girls are the ones where they're like, no, you know what? I want to live a soft life. I do not identify with struggle. I do not identify with this victim mindset. And so I'm just going to be over here having my pretty girl YouTube channel, or, like that's, you could argue that this is a part of what we've done even online, where it's like, yeah, we don't identify with this level of struggle, or, everybody else is our competition or whatever. We're just going to create our own spaces. And it's funny because we try to create our own spaces and then people chase us over here and they're chasing in our comment sections. But another response that I've noticed is the freeze response. So this is an interesting one. So if you look at this chart, it says under the freeze response, one of the symptoms of freezing is dissociation. So I've noticed that a lot of women will dissociate from their mixed race identity. They will no longer identify with being mixed, or they will hide part of their ancestries. They will hide their different admixtures. They will hide where they're from. They will hide who their family members are, or they'll be ashamed of their family members because they want to dissociate from whatever makes them different, because they understand that if they are viewed as having any special privileges, the people who feel like they're at the bottom are going to automatically antagonize you for that. Like, I remember when I was a kid, people used to make fun of me and they'd be like, "Shut up with your white mom." And it's like, my mom's not even she looks like how Selena looks or something like that, but yeah, like people sometimes they will make fun of you for your differences. And so I've noticed that a lot of exoticals will dissociate from any privileges. Like, we will deny having any privileges, or because you've lived with privileges and you've never not had those privileges, you don't even identify them as privileges. That's what happened to me. Like, I had never thought about things like skin tone, hair texture, or anything like that until other people who had different phenotypes than me brought it up. But I've noticed that dissociation is a very common one. Another thing I've noticed is almost like this numbness that a lot of exoticals have when it comes to their own experiences. So, for example, let's say a woman is directly jealous of you, she is directly being mean to you. I've noticed sometimes women will go numb where they have this response where they're almost in denial. They're like, oh no, she couldn't have been being mean to me. There's no way she could be jealous of me. Oh, there's no way that she could just dislike me because she thinks I'm more privileged than her. That's impossible. So there's almost like this numbness that some of us have towards ourselves, to where we don't want to face those emotions that we have of kind of feeling ostracized, or feeling like someone is kind of gunning for you out of jealousy or out of resentment, or because they feel like you are above them because of some of your features or because of your background. And then if you look at this chart again, it says under freeze, it says being stuck is another one of the feelings that you're going to have if you are kind of in the freeze response. And I've noticed that as well, where a lot of exoticals feel stuck because it's like, well, I don't want to deny my blackness. I don't want to deny where I come from, but I also don't want to deny my privilege. And so that's exactly what this YouTube channel is created for, because we have a dual experience. We have a fluid identity. So we've experienced both blackness and non-blackness. We've experienced both sides. We know what it's like to be privileged. We know what it's like to be a person of color. We know what it's like to be stereotyped in a negative way, but also in a very positive way. But I've noticed that if you are kind of in the freeze response, then you just feel stuck and you don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. Some people feel like they have to pick one side. Like, let's say you have a triracial background. Triracial means three races are in your DNA. So maybe you feel stuck, like, oh, I can only identify with one, or I'm only allowed to identify with blackness only. If I identify with anything else, then that is anti black. But another one of the trauma responses is fawning. So, fawning is like when you're trying to suck up to people. That's when you're being a people pleaser. And that's because you have witnessed so much bullying and so much cattiness to the point where you just want to keep the peace. And so, these are the women who will, maybe you'll hype up women who don't look like you, or, you'll just try to be super nice or try to pretend like you're so relatable to them, or like you're exactly the same. I've even seen some women use self depreciating humor, or they will make disparaging comments about themselves because they don't want the unambiguous women around them to feel bad about themselves, because they already know that a lot of them have felt very bad about themselves. If you look at some of their YouTube channels, you will see that. You'll see thousands of videos where they're talking about all of the negative aspects of their identities. And so, for some exoticals, as a trauma response to seeing their own mothers or their own sisters or their own, family members having such a bad experience with their phenotype, sometimes one of the coping mechanisms is fawning. So, trying super hard to be nice to that person, having no boundaries with that person. So they can bully you. They can call you the names of animals. They can call you ugly. They can talk shit about your hair texture or call you a ramen noodle head ass bitch or say you have a deflated afro or say that you've got about 4 inches of fried leave out, like how Chrissy said in one of her videos that she has now hidden. And then, if you have the fawn response, then you don't say anything back because you're just trying to protect yourself. Or you just say, oh, it's just jokes. Oh, it's not a big deal. So I've actually noticed a lot of men with that response. When unambiguous black men try to come against them, they'll be like, oh, it's all jokes or it's not a big deal. I've seen men do that. I've seen women do the same thing. But this leads to a sense of confusion because you're almost taking on an identity that's not your own. You're taking on an unambiguous identity when that's not your identity. You're taking on an experience that is not your own. You've never experienced all of the isms, or maybe you've never experienced some of the things that they've talked about, like not getting matches on dating apps or whatever, or some guy doesn't want to talk to you because of your phenotype or because he makes comments about whether it's your hair texture, skin tone, or whatever. And so that can lead to confusion because you're kind of trying to take on this victim narrative that you never even experienced. And I've noticed that, like, other people can see through it. People who actually have had those hard experiences, they can actually see through it when you haven't had those experiences. And this is why sometimes other women who are unambiguous will they'll call you out and they'll say, well, no, you don't understand what I'm going through because you have a different skin tone. Even if all of your other features are exactly the same. Something as simple as a skin tone can change your experience in society, especially if you live in the United States. I have noticed in the Black community, they seem to be more obsessed with skin tone versus race. But I've noticed that more so in the monoracial Black community, where, if you have a light skin tone, even if you are 99% African, it doesn't matter because your skin tone is different. And so you're going to be treated differently. And then same thing, if you only have 50 something percent African, but you have a dark skin tone, then they're going to try to pull you in to unambiguous blackness because there's an obsession with skin tone there. But I've noticed that if you have a fawn response where it's like you have no boundaries, you're just a people pleaser, then this makes it very easy for you to just kind of feel like you're confused in terms of who you are. And so that's really what this channel is about. It's about giving us a safe space so that we no longer have to be in these spaces where we are constantly having almost like these trauma responses, because at the end of the day, we did not create colorism, texturism, featureism, and racism. We didn't create pretty privilege or, all these different things that people complain about. We did not create dating apps and stuff, and we can't control who likes us on an app or what type of guy wants to date us or what guy sings about us in a song. But I've noticed that women who have victim mentalities, they want to punish you because of that, or they want to sometimes punish you because you look like the type of girl that her boyfriend would have liked in high school, or you look like the cheerleader. Oh my God, this just reminded me I need to tell a story. Well, actually, I can tell it right now. So I was friends. Actually, I'm still cool with this girl. Like, I don't have a problem with her because I don't see her very often. But there was this one girl, and she was unambiguous. She's actually an unambiguous Nigerian American girl. And I remember literally within the first day of her meeting me, she was like joking with me, and then she like yelled at me. So we were walking and she was like, move out of the way, just like yelling and screaming. And then one of the other girls there, she was like, hey, like, you're being a bully. Like, oh my God. And she was like, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I am being a bully. My bad. And then she said that the reason she did that was because I reminded her of her bullies in high school. She said I reminded her of the popular girls in high school that were her bullies, that were the cheerleaders. And so that's what made her have that response to me. And so that's part of why, I didn't get mad or anything like that. But a lot of women actually do have inferiority complexes in regards to women who may have your phenotype, or maybe they got their boyfriend stolen by someone who has your hair texture, or maybe they felt like their cousin, who looks like you, got treated better than them. And so this can cause them to lash out at you for no reason. And so I think this is a part of why it's so important for us to have our own safe spaces as well, because then we don't have to be in this constant social trauma response where it's like we have to fawn over others, or we have to, we're in kind of like this fight or flight mode. And so I'm really glad that we have so many different exotical channels that we can watch, and we have different people that we can open up to, like here in the comment section. By the way, be sure to join the Patreon if you haven't already. I also have a members page where we go deeper into issues like this. But what do you ladies think? Have you ever had any of these coping mechanisms or responses in the Black community because people have tried to bully you? What do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.